The Starside Prophecy by Tirri. Read by the author. Chapter 24. Another Go-Around. Kane walked up the steps of the Department of Planning and took the elevator to the 19th floor. After walking down the long hallway, he opened the door of a planning session already in progress and strode across the room. Kane moved quickly as if the meeting was unusually urgent. It wasn't. Kane occasionally intervened in the planning for those at the higher levels, but only when an earthly event of spiritual significance was due to take place. He seldom participated in the pre-life planning process of those on the lower levels of ascension, the guides more than capable of handling the regular ebb and flow of outbound and inbound souls. But today Kane had decided some direct input might be helpful to a young soul planning another go-around. Most souls tensed up when Kane entered the room, and Melchizedek had once teased Kane about his reputation as Starside's ungracious guide, suggesting that maybe he should cultivate a more congenial demeanour. Kane recommended that the godson cease worrying about trivialities and keep his little eye on the bigger picture. Kane sat down in the vacant chair next to a junior guide committed to those on the lower levels of ascension, who were what was commonly known as stuck. Kane nodded at the soul sitting opposite. "Hello, Larry. My name is Kane. I am principal guide here at the DPR. Welcome, my friend. Time for another go-around, I see." "Yes, around and around I go," were the only words Larry could muster. "Do you mind if I offer my input?" asked Kane as he turned towards the guide. "Not at all. Be my guest." Kane then looked at Larry. "It might be helpful, Larry, if I reiterate the basics, so pay attention. This is not a test or a drill. This is as real as it gets." Kane's tone was humorously stern, like a father lecturing his child. Souls journeying through the Ascension program fall into 4 categories: advanced souls, old souls, young souls, and lost souls. Advanced souls, having become conscious of their eternal mission of divine ascension, revisit planet Earth to practice, to fine-tune and conclude the art of conscious creation. Old souls are those who realise, often quite suddenly, from an intuitional awareness, that they have lived before and are on a sacred journey. These souls then begin to recreate their lives in accordance with divine law. Young souls, gung-ho and expectant, often head off to Earth with big plans for themselves, but many end up reenacting the same old scenarios because they are unaware of how reality gets created. Lost souls are just that, lost. Is it clear to you, Larry, which category you fall into? "Yes," responded Larry sulkily. "Good," said Kane. "That's a start." The process of gaining control of one's mind in order to consciously manifest its contents has seldom been a trouble-free road. It can be full of snares and ugly green trolls, and if not vigilant, one will find oneself repeating certain phases over and over again, which has always been a byproduct of engaging in the divine plan. You and you alone are responsible for creating everything that has ever happened to you. You do understand that, don't you, Larry? "Yes." Larry nodded the word more than spoke it. Larry had spent so many lifetimes stuck on level 2 it was embarrassing. Larry and other souls like him had been incarnating over and over in various cultures, regions and situations, but with unyielding, stubborn mindset that closely resembled the ones that came before. Each life was almost indistinguishable from all the others. And when they arrived back Starside, most regarded their slow progress with similar disdain. Kane referred to them as snail blazers. Today Larry was back at the Department of Planning, picking at his fingernails as Kane spoke. Larry had a deep-rooted tendency to indulge his carnal nature. The anti-force told him he should seek pleasure wherever he could find it and screw everything and everyone else, and he did. He had seldom heard the still small voice within. If he had heard it, he would not be having to suffer the self-imposed disgrace of yet another go-around. Not that Larry's guide found her charge in any way disgraceful. She felt nothing but compassion, and vowed this time to remain hot on his heels with a fresh presence that might stimulate Larry to ask the heavens for clarity. "Ye have not because ye ask not," she told Larry for the 3rd time since the meeting began. Larry smiled, but he wondered why she continued to utter such words that had never once impacted him while physical. With a heavy heart, Larry, with his guide, had decided that his next life should begin in a provincial village outside Honiton, Devon. Larry's new mother was part of his core group and had been physical for the last 30 years. Her name was Becky, and she had just found out she was expecting her first child. Larry's new father-to-be was an introvert named John. Becky had been Larry's wife in a previous incarnation, and Larry had been neglectful of her needs. They had been firm friends in many lifetimes prior to that one, also brother and sister, uncle and nephew, and arch-enemies too. Because Larry's new mother-to-be was already 3 months pregnant, her fetus was waiting for soul assignment. Larry was due to go in utero the following morning. For the most part, Larry and his new father-to-be would remain estranged. Their souls had only interacted superficially before, but both Larry and his new mother-to-be had many boxes to tick. During their current respective go-arounds, both had decided to work on self-control and temperance. Until they had control over their lower faculties, creating a life of their choice would be a distant prospect. To successfully create a life of choice was the goal every soul strived for, the mountain peak. Oh, to be a graduate, thought Larry. While physical, Larry had always been a lazy and self-indulgent individual, but he had not accumulated serious karmic baggage in spite of acquiring several addictions, spending endless hours alone watching pornography, drinking beer, and stuffing his face with cake in his most previous lifetime. To establish a possible remedy, his guide revealed that his mother's life plan had included cultivating a very strong work ethic within her only child. Habits of hard work and responsibility would leave Larry little time to indulge any type of addiction. His mother-to-be also had a penchant for laziness and poor self-discipline, and it was likely Larry would have to care for her and their home more than other children his age. Cain looked at Larry and suggested that, as an aid to spiritual growth, he should develop astigmatism during puberty, possess a low libido, an intolerance to gluten and dairy, and remain relatively poor throughout his life. Using his previous lifetime as an indication, excess income would not likely be put to good use. Larry was not thrilled with any of the suggestions, and could have declined them all, but he agreed because he understood the logic. Larry had only been back Starside for 6 weeks, but his guide had advised him that a quick turnaround would be beneficial to accomplish what could be his Level 2 graduation. He knew that, if he made the right choices, an extended afterlife would be in the cards. Larry was happy with this offer, an obvious enticement by his guide who knew him well. Larry's mind quickly examined the endless possibilities of a pleasure-filled afterlife, and it was only after Cain's exaggerated clearing of the throat that he felt compelled to reappropriate his attention. When Cain broached the subject of shock therapy, Larry became agitated, finding it difficult to remain still, let alone open-minded. Shock therapy always involved a sudden and startling event that was predestined to jolt the participant. 1 minute a routine life was the comfortable norm, the next the rug was pulled and all that changed. Larry told his guide that this time he would prefer not to be jolted. He would earn his way at his pace, even if it seemed snail-like to those who had no idea what being a slow learner felt like. "That's your call," said Cain indifferently. Larry's guide continued with the fine-tuning of her charge's life plan, which was being recorded on the parchment in front of her. Larry made known a few minor wants and told his guide that he did not want children and only wished to be physical for 35 years. As a means of stimulation to overcome another unhealthy tendency, the inability to relate to and enjoy the company of others, Larry requested that, around his 30th birthday, he experience an illness followed by a lengthy period of hospitalisation. Having no choice but to allow others to care for him might help with his penchant for isolation. "That sounds a bit like shock therapy to me," said Cain. Larry laughed half-heartedly and then requested that his death be sudden and painless. His guide added embolism to his life plan and then suggested that he encounter several teachers at specific times to act as examples of potential. His guide then reminded her charge that his life was intertwined closely with his mother's, and her needs and her requirements were also discussed to see how Larry could be of assistance to her spiritual growth. As his life plan reached completion, Larry was once again picking at his fingernails. Kane attempted to instill within Larry a sense of calm by suggesting that, by using eternity as time's relationship, his upcoming life of 35 years would really just be the blink of an eye. "Yes," said Larry with little enthusiasm. "The old chef at the Italian restaurant told me the same thing last night." Kane continued, "Remember, Larry, those in the physical are wired to seek their purpose. This inner yearning is often very strong. There are just too many distractions for it to be any other way. Try to enjoy the journey, because the mental act of appreciation and gratitude means automatically the anti-force is not in charge. A better quality of manifestation will then automatically happen when you think positively. What is not written as destiny will physically manifest in your life as a result of magnetism. What you spend time thinking about, you will experience, good and bad. It is very important that you get this. Life does not just happen. Get this and you will make a lot of progress. Stay conscious, Larry. This is the best piece of advice I have for you." Kane stood up, tucked his chair under the table and made his way toward the door. Before leaving, he turned to face Larry one more time. "Good luck, my friend, and remember, you have two choices in life. Try or try harder." Kane then opened the door and closed it quietly behind him. Nothing about the meeting had been out of the ordinary, and no refinements to Larry's life plan called for. Larry's guide smiled at her charge. "Larry, when you notice a bunch of useless thoughts dominating your mind, you must recapture your focus. Turn it inward and ask questions like, who am I? What am I? Why do I exist? Why was I born? What is the premise of my existence?" This shuts down the anti-force and allows the still small voice room. You must do this as often as you can, day in, day out, for all the days of your life. It must become a permanent waking practice. Then, at some point, the gap between compulsive thinking and your ability to stop it becomes less wide. The gap between thoughts is your direct awareness. And no matter how brief, use this gap to either rest or envision your dreams and imagine your destined future. Then have faith and maintain it, even and especially when the anti-force sneers. Communications this side of the veil is waiting for you to do this and is poised to take action. Remember that. Larry's guide took a sip of water. She was dressed like a nun. Larry could not see her forehead or her chin, just her eyes, nose and mouth. He had never been able to understand why she would want to live in a cloth bag. She had never once dressed differently, and Larry sometimes fantasized about what she might look like in a bikini. He had always liked her sonorous voice, which was distinctly female and full of compassion. But what she had just said almost felt demeaning. "I'm not an idiot, you know. I am aware that creation is technically the easiest thing in the world to do, but you know as well as I do that it is the hardest thing to do too." "I know, Larry, all of us here know, trust me, but you must listen to me without some inner commentary preventing you from hearing. I will see to it that this information reaches you at the times you most need it. Larry, the entire purpose of the physical journey is to consciously bring the invisible activity of your mind into physical form. If the outcome is positive, you have created light. Hence you become more like the light, and your experiences will be exhilarating and exciting. If outcomes are created that negatively affect the well-being of others, know that the anti-force of the thinking mind was the cause, and the karmic consequences must be experienced. So again, Larry, try not to let your focus recede. If you do, all sorts of random thoughts will commission Starside to send back a mirror image of what has been called into existence by your thoughts. This is a non-reversible process. You will have to deal with what you create, in the lifetime you are in or in the next. Larry understood everything his guide had said, but the real task would be to consciously access this knowledge from the confines of the anti-force consciousness that would soon be his. His guide would do her best, but would he hear her? Spiritual knowledge had to be invited in by calming the thinking mind, so the still small voice could be heard. But Larry had never been able to prevent a mass of chaotic images and negative suggestions from monopolising his awareness that he unwittingly sustained with his attention. Larry knew he must consciously harmonise his thought life, and as he made the sign of the cross, he vowed in a strong and powerful affirmation that he would do better. Antechamber 755678996 was where anti-force would be applied to Larry's consciousness, shortly after which he would be in the womb of his new mother-to-be. Larry would then be born into another life of trials and tests, all passable if handled with proper measure, but even if they weren't, like every other soul in the Ascension program, he would simply pick up where he had left off the next time around. Larry and his guide stood up and tucked their chairs under the desk and made their way out of the room and along the hallway towards the elevator, which took them down to the 4th floor. Through the glass panels of the bridge that led to the Department of Birthing and Life Support, Larry could see the Fountain of Youth below, holy water arcing through the air and forming crystal-like droplets before falling back into the font. Suddenly a surge of faith in the possibilities of spirit totally consumed him, and for that brief moment in time, Larry had faith that his new life would yield better fruit than any before it. He almost had a spring in his step. Larry's guide smiled but remained silent. Although her charge was buoyant now, the fact that one's entire reality was self-generated was not always an easy thing to accept on the other side of the veil.